Hello and welcome to Canvas, the Niger-Delta Roundtable, where I discuss the future of this region, blessed humongously with hydrocarbon resources. Every week, we give time to reflect on topics relevant to the development of the Niger-Delta and her people. Now, this episode is no different, as we're here once again to focus on how to take the Niger-Delta to a more promising future. Now, this program is sponsored by the operator of the NNPC SPDC Total Energies Ajib joint venture, the Shell Petroleum Development Company of Nigeria Limited, headquartered in Port Harcourt. Thank you for joining. I'm Adedayo Ilushakin. For this episode, our topic is, what have we done with AIDS? Once again, welcome to this episode. We're diving into a topic of immense global significance. Topic again, what have we done with AIDS? Now, as we observe World AIDS Day, December 1st, it is poignant moment to reflect on the journey we have undertaken in the fight against HIV/AIDS. Since the early 1980s, the world has been grappling with this epidemic. And over the decades, we have witnessed remarkable progress in understanding, treating, and preventing this disease. Yet, the journey has been fraught with challenges, from the initial fear and stigma to the ongoing quest for a cure. On this episode, we'll explore the milestones we've achieved, the hurdles we've overcome, and the work that still lies ahead. We'll hear from an expert in the field and share stories from possibly those affected, and discuss how communities around the world are continuing the fight against HIV/AIDS. Join us as we reflect on the past, assess the present, and look forward to a future where HIV/AIDS is no longer a global threat. Stay tuned for an enlightening and inspiring discussion. Again, our topic for this episode on Canvas, what have we done with AIDS? My guest is Dr. Diana Babel. Dr. Diana Babel is a medical doctor working with the Rivers State government and is currently serving in the capacity of the state's health educator at the Rivers State Primary Healthcare Management Board. Dr. Diana Babel, hello, welcome to Canvas, the Niger-Delta Roundtable.
Thank you very much, Daya. Good afternoon, and good afternoon to all our listeners.
Or should I say, welcome
Once
back.
again, yes, because I've been here before.
And it's a continuing featuring on the podcast. And
Thank you for having me.
It's great talking with you. You give great insight to the discussions. You're obviously passionate about what you do, but ensuring people have a better quality of life.
Yes, sir.
So it's great to have you here again.
Thank you.
Let's start this way. I remember years ago when I was younger, one of the biggest conversations the world over at some point was AIDS, HIV/AIDS, and everywhere you turned, every media, whether it was broadcast media, TV, radio, print, everyone was talking about HIV/AIDS. There were campaigns everywhere. It was a big deal. Some time has passed between then and now. Is AIDS still, or HIV/AIDS, is it still a big deal globally? Is it still as big a deal as it was back then, or have things changed now?
Okay, thank you very much. Let's start from what HIV is. Let's break it down for our audience. So,
Please.
human immunodeficiency virus causes acquired immune deficiency syndrome. So one is an infection and one is the disease. So you can have HIV infection and not have the disease. It's possible to be on that level. So it's like a progression from being infected to manifesting symptoms that tell us as clinicians or as a public that this person has AIDS. So back then, the fear was people crossed quickly from HIV to AIDS because there were no interventions in between to slow down that progression. And then there was now the awareness. That's why you saw that big talk during the time you were describing of people knowing about HIV, the stigma, the whole thing that came around. And the story began for HIV in 1981, precisely, amongst the gay community. There were some men that were found to have a different form of pneumonia, and it was associated with immune deficiency or immune compromise. And that is where we picked the HIV virus among that category of persons. And then it's still a public health threat. I heard you mention that in your intro. The world is trying to look at a way where by 2030, we should have eradicated HIV
Really?
or have it under control. Under control means zero transmissions, zero transmissions and then zero deaths from the infection. So yes, it's still a public health threat, and we're still working on it in the space of medicine, research, science, governance, leadership. We are still working on HIV/AIDS.
How has the understanding of HIV/AIDS evolved since the epidemic began in the 80s?
Okay, so that's fine. We, like I said, discovered amongst the gay community, and then following that, we started having are there ways we can pick or test for HIV virus? What does it really do to the body that we can actually, as scientists, follow through? So beyond the virus getting into the human body, and the virus has an affinity for our immune cells, we call them the T cells. So when it gets to the human body, it kind of enters the genome or the DNA or your makeup. So that's the bad part about this virus. It if you know of what they call zombies, it takes over you completely. So even if you want to fight it, you have to kill yourself to fight that kind of virus. So yes, we looked for ways to test. We couldn't particularly test the antibodies yet. We couldn't test for the antigen. So a virus comes into your body as an antigen, your body picks it and makes antibodies. So you can either test for the antigen or the response of the body, the antibodies. As science evolved over time, we now started picking the antibodies with some things we do, some test mechanisms. After a while, we could pick the antigen itself, the virus, and then we could now pick specific parts of the virus. So we are at the stage where we can do tests that actually identifies the virus in the human body, not just the antibodies, not just pieces of the antigens, but the actual virus in the human body. That's where we are now. So we have evolved over time from not knowing anything about what to do, getting to testing antibodies, getting to testing for antigens, and now actually getting to test for the virus itself. So that's where we are.
I think you've in some part answered the next question I'm going to ask. But I'll still, I'd like you to focus on that.
Okay.
What are some of the major milestones that we've achieved over the last few decades since, as far as HIV is concerned?
Okay, so beyond testing and discovering antibodies and antigens, remember when you find an illness, you need a solution to the problem, treatment. And like I said, the virus is such that it becomes one with your body. So the treatment you need to look for is one that will stop the process of the division of the virus in the human body. 2, help the body's immune system to at least be built up so that the virus does not replicate in your body. And then 3, increase your quality of life generally. We can't particularly kill that virus, but we can slow down its division, replication, multiplication in the human body. And then that person will not come down with, like I said, it's a spectrum from being infected to having the disease. So now we have treatment. That's one milestone. In addition to treatment, we also have awareness creation. I remember when Magic Johnson came up and said, I'm HIV positive, the basketballer, and then I think they about started the Red Ribbon Foundation, HIV, our day, December 1st, we do this red ribbon thing all around, and there's increased awareness starting from that point. That's another milestone. The more we get to hear about it, we hear that there's not much danger to it. One can live a full complement of his or her life being positive. You don't need to die from HIV/AIDS. Increased awareness campaign. Then we went to the point where some governments began to put money together and say, okay, we want to support treatment, we want to support research, we want to support diagnosis. PEPFAR, for example, that's one. Global strategy, for example, that's another one. UNAIDS, for example. So we had people putting money together and saying, some countries cannot afford these treatments that we have. Can we buy and send to them? Subsidize. So in Nigeria, you see that our clients come to, we don't call them patients, we call them clients. Our clients come to the health facilities, they are enrolled, and then they can get their drugs free of charge. There was a point in time where you had clients that paid for, those drugs, maybe at chemists, because they didn't want their identity to be known as positive clients. And it's really expensive. Now you have people putting money together to say, don't pay for your drugs, let's pay for those drugs, and then you have it for free. That's a good milestone as well. So we have come a long way in terms of milestones achieved in fighting against HIV/AIDS.
Speaking of treatment, when you hear treatment for HIV/AIDS, the word antiretroviral
Yes,
comes to mind.
that's true.
How have antiretroviral therapies changed the lives or impacted the lives of people living with HIV/AIDS?
Okay, remember I said the virus becomes one with your body. So there are cells in your body, the immune cells, and they target the immune cells. So imagine that you have soldiers that can fight. They have removed their ammunition. No guns, no knives, nothing to defend you with. That's what the virus does. So what happens is everybody that passes can beat you up. So the problem was not just the virus itself in the body, not just killing the immune system, but that anything that passes can drop on that person. So malaria passes, you catch it. Tuberculosis passes, you catch. Cancer passes, you catch. Any other viral illnesses, you catch. So the person was exposed to everything. With the onset of those drugs, the immune system is better protected. The virus replicates less. So the viral load, which we actually measure in the lab, drops. So from the time we catch you as a positive patient, not you, sir, by the time we catch a client as a positive patient, we're looking for what's the quantity of your immune cells that are still in action, and then what's the quantity of virus you have. There should be a balance. And then what our drugs will do is tilt the balance, reduce viral loads, and then increase immune cells. What it means is that someone with the virus will have less ability to be beaten by anything that passes by. So the pneumonias, the tuberculosis, other viral illnesses, you have less propensity to catch those things and you can stay healthier. So that's the plus with antiretroviral drugs.
Speaking still with antiretroviral drugs and the viral load, I've heard and I've read as well, and please confirm if this is true or not, that consistency in the use of the antiretroviral therapies reduces the viral load to such extent that it's almost non-existent in the body, and you can't transmit it any longer. Is that correct?
Beautiful. That's the aim of our antiretroviral drugs. It will reduce the viral load to an undetectable point, such that when we test you, we can give you a negative result by testing. And then that's when we have people that go and say, God has healed me, miracle has happened, HIV negative, positive became HIV negative. You have been on your drugs consistently. The drugs have done their work. And then you come out with a negative test. That's not the time to stop your drugs at all.
So does a negative test actually mean negative?
No, the negative means we cannot detect the virus in your body because the quantity is too low for our test to catch. Doesn't mean the virus is not in the human body, sir. Doesn't mean, yes. So it's still there, but we can't detect it. And the result is negative because we can't detect it. So yes, you are correct that the ARVs, antiretroviral drugs, they reduce viral load, and then we actually can have a negative test. And then beyond that, because the viral load is dropping, the person has less propensity to transmit the virus. So the beauty is that when somebody is on their drug, they have a reduced chance to give somebody else the virus.
Policies. Government is key. And you mentioned government earlier on, and the efforts that they're making, and public health policies, and you work in the public health space with the River State Primary Healthcare Board. How effective have both global and even local public health policies, especially in the Niger-Delta and River State, how effective have they been in addressing HIV/AIDS?
Okay, so there's something we call the 90, 90, 90. That's one policy. 90% of persons all around the world should know their HIV status. What it means is that wherever we catch you in a facility, we should be able to offer you a test. We do what we call the opt-out. We used to do opt-in before. Opt-in means we sit together, we talk about HIV, we educate you and say, okay, there's a test for it. How many of us want to screen? And then I raise my hand, somebody else raises their hand. They have opted into tests. We have stopped doing that. What we do now is opt-out. We assume all of you would not mind us testing you. If you don't want this test, you can excuse us in the room. That's one strong policy. So 90% of persons need to know globally, not just in Nigeria, globally need to know their HIV status. 90% of persons that have been tested positive, that's another 90, need to be on drugs. So that's 190 as well. And then 90% of people should have zero transmissions. So if we keep to the rule of we test, we treat, we will not transmit. That's one good policy. The aim is by 2030, we should have zero transmission. And we worked with this 1990 up to 2015. And then now we have increased it to 95. There's now a new policy of 95% know their status, 95% be on drugs, and 95% no transmission. And if we have a government that has, I think, strong political will. They are partners in the HIV space, supporting different parts of the program. So now we don't have somebody that needs to walk into the facility to have their drugs. We have partners that support drugs being taken into the community. Clients have been enrolled. They are scheduled according to drug refill. We take their drugs to them in the community. They don't need to come to the
Even here in River State?
Yes, it's happening in River State. So there's so much will to protect the identity of these clients. That's number one. And then there's a will to ensure that they actually get drugs and get treatment.
I'd like to interrogate the 90-90-90 policy further. The first 90 is what again?
We should be tested. Everybody should know. 90% of people should know their status. Yes.
Now, you mentioned previously there was an opt-in policy.
Yes.
Now it's an opt-out policy.
Yes.
Now, does that suggest that people get tested for HIV even without their consent? Is that what it means?
We need provider consent, or we need client consent. The thing is, we tell you that you are in our space. We have given you a health education, talk about HIV, how it's transmitted, the benefits of testing. We educate you fully. You know what you are into. The opt-out means you don't want us to test you. Otherwise, as you are here, can you mind passing through? You came for immunization, pass through the HIV desk, have your test, get to know your results. So you came for family planning, pass through that desk, get to know your results, That's what we do. So there's nobody that will, we don't jump onto people and test them without them consenting. So you are aware they are going to be tested. At that point, if you don't want to be tested, you can opt out.
The second 90 is
90% that are positive should be on their drugs.
Is that the case then in Niger-Delta and River State, for example? Are people really getting access to those drugs as the policy suggests?
We are trying. I would say we are trying so much. Because like I had said, there are partners in the HIV space. Beyond those supplying kits for testing, there are those supplying drugs. Those supplying drugs, there are those that are ensuring that the needed people or needed community have the drugs. So not just sitting in the facility and saying, come for your drug on so and so day. We will schedule you and say, on the 28th of November, Mr. Okafor ought to have a refill. Somebody that is our community tracker will go and give Mr. Okafor his refill in his house. If he doesn't want the person to come to his house, there's a location that you and Mr. Okafor will meet. You give him his drug. You enter it in the card, tick it and say he has taken his drug. But eventually he has any other issues. They are not trained to handle other issues. You can now say, Mr. Okafor, beyond your refill, you have XYZ thing, you can come to the facility at so and so time and have that complaint addressed. We have that system in place. It's working.
I observed that you said we are trying. Does that suggest that we are not meeting up with the 90% policy?
We haven't met up with 90%. I think we are at about 70 something currently.
So what
globally.
So what is happening to globally?
Globally, and even in Nigeria,
how
we are
about
translating
Nigeria,
it.
Niger-Delta?
Yeah, we are translating it into, because the statistics are WHO statistics.
Okay.
So we translate into the local climes. I've not seen any statistics for where we are currently in the Niger-Delta.
Okay.
But like I said, we are trying.
Now, for those, let's assume that our data is similar to what the global trends are. So let's say we're doing 70% here for the sake of this conversation.
Okay.
So especially here in the Niger-Delta and in River State, because that's where you work primarily, that's your catchment area. What happens to the other 20% or thereabouts that don't have access? What happens to them?
We still, like, December 1st is a time to always raise awareness for testing, treatments, and some persons will still tell you we have not heard that. They are still in denial to the fact that HIV exists and it can cause a problem. So the more behavioral change comes when we speak about things. So you speak about it, talk about it. So we make noise every December 1st in the States, even in the country. Make a lot of noise about it, and that person that hasn't heard will hear. Peradventure, after hearing, you pick an interest in actually going to get tested. So access is there, availability is there. Information needs to be more. That's what I think.
The final 90, it has to do with transmission, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
Can you, what exactly is that still?
So it means that I take my drugs to the point where viral load is really
so 90% of people who
take their drugs, yes, should have
are not able to
viral load that is really low, yes.
Okay, so are we there yet? In other words, I'm asking, what are the figures like in terms of new transmissions or new cases, so to speak?
Yes. We are still finding new cases, unfortunately so. That is because of our behavior pattern in this part of the world. I forgot to say that transmission is through vertical, horizontal. The vertical is from mother to child. So a HIV positive mother can pass on the virus to her unborn baby in the womb. Horizontal are the different aspects of our behavior. 1, unprotected sex. 2, gay sex. 3, sex workers, 4, shooting up drugs intravenously with needles that are not sterile. 5, sometimes we don't do our due diligence in the lab when we want to do blood transfusion or organ transplant. So you can have transmission through those methods. So there are a lot of loopholes here and there that we haven't really closed in terms of ensuring that transmission is as low as we want it to be. But I think that we are getting there. We are always getting there. And then we like moving the goalposts. Yeah. So we said 2030 to get to the point of zero transmission. We may likely we are in 2024. So we have 6 years. Some countries have achieved what I'm talking about.
Okay.
So it's doable.
But is it feasible for us?
Nigerians, I keep saying Nigerians, we are faith people. The blood of Jesus covers a lot of things, we have faith in God, so
it's not our portion.
It's not our portion. So those kind of things, it reduces the efforts we need to make as scientists. But we're getting there.
Stigma. Stigma. It was a big issue years back. Is this still an issue now?
Yes. Yes, unfortunately. I don't think we'll ever be able to remove stigma from certain kinds of illnesses, HIV being one. What we can do is educate the public to be more, to have empathy. Sometimes it's not the person's fault that the person is HIV positive. I just mentioned the ways of transmission. Peradventure, I fell ill. I went to a hospital where I was given blood transfusion that had HIV in its window state. So they would have screened the blood, but they didn't find the virus at that point. And then by the time the blood is in my system, the virus manifests. It's not my fault that I went and got HIV. So, but everybody seems to think you're HIV positive is because you are promiscuous. So we need to disabuse our mind from that pattern of thinking. It can happen to anybody via any means. It's not our place to judge anyone. We are very judgmental in our country.
Still speaking along the lines of stigma
Yeah.
and how we are as a people in our country, Nigeria and the Niger-Delta, what roles do cultural attitudes play in the spread or prevention of it, especially in our climate?
So because we know we are going to be judged, we will not want to go and get tested. We don't get tested. We have the virus living in us. We don't know about it.
What you don't know
will
can
not
kill you.
Unfortunately, this one, what you didn't know, may likely manifest and kill you. And then because you didn't know you are positive, you are still living your life, big boy, all the girls are around you, you are playing around without a condom, and you are giving everybody the thing. So that's
big girls also, not just big boys.
yes, defend your gender is allowed.
No. I'm just so nobody thinks it's only the big boys who spread it.
Like I said, they are sex workers, and sex workers are both female sex workers and male sex workers. So I agree with you completely. So somebody does not know they are positive. Because of stigma, they don't want to go and test. They don't want to find out. And because you don't want to find out, probably you have it. You'll be transmitting it. So, like you said, the culture does not allow us to be. But in our climb, we have what we call confidentiality. So there are people that are our clients that you won't even know that they are positive. And we have kept the secrets with them. There are couples that are discordant couples, meaning that one person has, the other person does not have. It's possible like that. And with the drugs, like I said, because you are on drugs, virus is reduced, the load is reduced, you can hardly transmit to your partner. And they are living well, having HIV negative children. So we need to be, that's that culture thing. But confidentiality has helped. So now we have people that don't need to come to, like I said, we have community services. People don't need to come to the health facility to get their drugs. Once we catch someone and enroll, we can say, okay, we have XYZ persons that are in your community that are our staff that can bring drugs to you. Are you okay with it? Yes. Where can they meet you? Tell us. They may not come to your house. Maybe you don't want them to identify that. That auntie nurse, now they give HIV drugs for clinical. Why didn't they come our locality, So you just it's we kind of try to iron these things out so that we want to meet that target,
We have to go for a break now, but one more question. It's a slight digression, but I think it's critical to the conversation somewhat on a larger scale. There is also, I think, a perception that's rife amongst us. Maybe also it's a cultural thing, I don't know, that don't go for medical tests. Because if you go for testing, doctors will always find something. They must find something. So for that reason, don't get tested. What will be your response to that?
Okay, now, prevention is in stages in medicine. We have the primordial prevention, primary prevention, secondary, tertiary. I want to do primordial and primary. Primordial is policies, health education, health promotion. So I'm not at risk yet. I'm not exposed yet, but I know something about what I'm going to be exposed to. Primary, we have early detection. Early detection by screening and testing. It's important to know what's happening in your body because our bodies are machines. Whether you like it or not, something is happening in that body. And the truth about the matter is, when you go to the doctors to have a test done, we may find something that you may not like. But is it not better to catch something early and intervene than to not know about it and find the manifestation of it 5 years from the time that you ought to have? So for me, have yourself tested for anything. Whenever I talk, I say go for your annual checkups. Annual checkups, the doctors will do almost everything for you. And they can pick something and say, sir, this one we don't like. Come back in a month's time. Come back in 6 months' time. Let's follow it up. And it helps you to curtail. Or we say, oh, this is what we saw. This is a lifestyle change we want you to have. follow like this, it will not progress more than this. It's better than coming down with it hits you bad. Yeah.
It is Conversing Niger-Delta Roundtable. On this episode, we're discussing what have we done with HIV/AIDS. My guest is a public health expert, Dr. Dana Bamba. We'll go for a break. We'll return in a moment. A conversation will continue. Please stay with us.
Our yellow and black markers indicate pipeline and flow line right-of-way boundaries. Your activity could impact on the buried high-pressure hydrocarbon pipelines and flow lines, leading to possible leaks and explosion. Please keep off. Do not engage in sand mining or any form of excavation, pipeline vandalism, oil theft, and bush burning within pipeline and flow line right-of-way. Do not farm, trade, or locate any business on pipeline and flow line right-of-way. It is against the law to apportion land, sell, or build on pipeline and flow line right-of-way. Maintain a setback distance of at least 30 meters or about 100 feet from the right-of-way boundaries always. We care for your safety and that of the environment.
This message is brought to you by the Shell Petroleum Development Company of Nigeria Limited, SPDC, operator of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company, NNPC Limited, Total Energies, and Ajib Joint Venture.
Welcome back. Still conversing Niger-Delta Roundtable in commemoration of World AIDS Day, December 1 annually. We're discussing what have we done with HIV/AIDS. It's been decades now, since the 80s. And my guest here says it's still a global health threat. One that we've made remarkable progress with, must mention, and that we hope to have made significant advancements, maybe even completely stopping the spread of it by 2030. As feasible or not as that may be globally, especially here in Nigeria and in the Niger-Delta region. But the conversation continues. My guest is Dr. Dana Bamba, public health expert here in River State. Thank you. You're welcome again.
Thank you very much.
I know that in the course of your work, or I suspect in the course of your work, you've dealt with people dealing with all kinds of illnesses at different stages. Can you share a story, or one you're familiar with, of a person affected or infected with HIV/AIDS, and how they have managed that condition and how their life has played out since they found out, even up till now?
Okay. I think I was a house officer at the time, and a lady came with symptoms, recurring fever, at the point in time, persistent diarrhea, and she was about to get married, and we had asked God the necessary questions and even asked about sexual history. Coincidentally, she had not had sex at all as a person. So ordinarily, your mind will not go to test her for HIV because...
So even doctors have that bias also.
Well, out of the blues, we said, okay, let's just test for HIV. And we tested and she was positive. So we now had to sit down properly and take a history. So where could you have been exposed from? We traced it down to a dental procedure. She went to have something done on her teeth, and that was the only place we could see sharps. One of the ways of transmission is sharp objects, not just injection needles, razor blades and instruments we use for surgery and all those procedures. So that's where she got it from. And then after all, in those days when you deliver the results, there's a lot of crying, a lot of...
My life is over.
My life is over. Where will I start from? And then after all, we let you cry because it's heavy to tell anybody you're going to live your life popping drugs just to be healthy. And if you don't pop those drugs, your lifespan is going to be cut short. So she eventually came to terms with it, and she began her treatment. Fortunately, that time she was about to get married as well. So... And then...
Did you say fortunately?
Fortunately, she was about to get married. Not unfortunately. It's a good thing to be married, sir.
Of course.
So the man was really understanding because, this kind of, you are positive, I'm negative. Because he was negative. They had not had any meeting. And we kind of explained that if she's on hard drugs, she has a less likelihood to pass it on to you if you meet. And then because people want to have children, there are ways to have children and have negative children since the man is negative. And then we're able to advise in that respect. And I think she has about 2 children now, and they are still happily married. She's still on her drugs and she's healthy. The thing about the beauty about the drugs is if you are meant to live for 20 years as a person, maybe that's what God gave to you after the point you found out you are positive. Once you are on your drugs, you will live those 20 years. When you don't take the drugs, you would cut short your lifespan.
Mm.
Yeah. So that's my small story.
And thanks for sharing that.
Yes.
What are some of the challenges that, besides the stigma and other things, what are some of the other challenges that people living with HIV/AIDS have to contend with? How does it affect? And I know I've heard it said, oh, you can still live a normal life, you can still, yeah. But then again, there is something.
Yes.
So how does it affect their lives? How does it alter their lives?
The first thing is drug burden. I have to take a pill every day of my life. Some persons don't like drinking medicine in the first place. How much more you have to take one that if you don't take it, you are at risk of all kinds of things happening to you. So it's tiring to swallow those medicines. Two, some of those drugs have side effects that are not too friendly, and you have to live with those side effects for the rest of your life because you want to stay healthy. You had mentioned stigma. Another one for me is these serodiscordant couples. Man is positive, wife is negative, or wife negative, man positive. Sometimes it brings issues in the home, and some persons go through some kind of gender-based violence, assaults. Some persons lose their homes just because they are positive. It shouldn't be so. Some places will refuse to employ you if they know you are positive. And that's a challenge because I'm positive, I'm not disabled. I should have work. But you don't want to give me work because I'm positive. That's wrong. But it's still happening amongst us, Those are the few that comes to my mind.
I'm sure that there's research in the field of HIV/AIDS. I watch different kinds of programming. I like late night TV shows, American late night TV shows. One of my favorites is the late night show with Stephen Colbert, and every now and then he talks about during one of his segments. He talks about some funny advancements that researchers are making in the US. Funny, I don't want to mention a specific one. And when he's done talking, he say, by the way, have you found the cure for cancer?
Okay.
He focuses on cancer. I don't know why he does that, but he probably has a personal reason why he does that. And you hear that scientists have discovered this here, discovered that. Then he asks, why are you guys focusing on this? Have you found a cure for cancer yet? So I could ask as well. Have we found a cure for AIDS or HIV and we're focusing on this or that? So what is the goal for researchers when it comes to treatment or even research as far as HIV is concerned?
Okay. I think one of the things you said during the intro is HIV is managed. We don't have a cure yet. And my answer to your question is yes and no. Because there is a method to stop it. Or there's a cure, but it's not a cure that's feasible or generalizable.
But what's the goal right now? Is it to find a cure or is it to improve management?
The truth about it is we already have management that is beautiful, Be on your drugs. Viral load is reduced, zero transmission. We already have that in place. Our aim is a cure that can be generalized to the public. We have something. There's a story, the Berlin patient. I think Timothy Brown or Thomas Brown, he had stem cell transplant with donor stem cell from someone who is resistant. There are people like that. No matter how much exposure they have, they will never come down with HIV. So a donor stem cell from a person who was resistant to actually coming down with the virus. And that man, we call him the Berlin patient, got that stem cell transplant, stopped his antiretroviral drugs, didn't ever have any trace of the virus on him. He died of something else later on. I think he had this procedure in 2017 or 2018. I think he died of cancer, leukemia, much later on. Now, stem cell transplant is not an easy procedure. It's an expensive procedure. has a lot of side effects. It's not generalizable to the public. It's not something that we can replicate for everybody that has HIV. So there is one way, and they are still exploring how better can we harness this knowledge from this particular research. How can we make it safer, and how can we generalize it? Before we can do that, we are with our ARVs, antiretroviral drugs. We have improved on the drugs. Before now, we used to have, when a patient comes, you have this drug bag has like 4 or 5 drugs in one. But now we have fixed dose combinations. So it's just one pill that patient has to pop. Unlike when he had to have 4, 5, 6 to take at a time just because he wants to be healthy. So we are evolving in science, and we are making progress. But I won't say the progress is slow, because you need to look at when we do things in the lab and the human body are two different things. Can you replicate what you have done in the lab successfully in the human body without triggering side effects that will not kill the man? We don't want to kill him trying to treat him. So we're not there with that balance yet.
I'm curious though, how do we discover persons who are resistant to the virus? What's the process of doing that?
I think it's a chance finding.
Okay.
But the truth about it is there are people that are resistant to that virus, And if we can find 5, 6, or 10, 100 of them, and then be harnessing their stem cells to transplant, but come on, it's a chance finding. We don't know who has the resistant gene.
I must ask this question. Why can't we just find a cure for it? Why does it seem impossible to find a cure for HIV/AIDS? And there are conspiracy theories, I must throw this in as well, that Big Pharma has a cure already, but it pays more
to sell the antiretroviral drugs.
Exactly, so have people live on it than to cure people permanently.
Okay, I had said that when the virus enters your human body, it becomes one with your body. Becomes one with your DNA cells, especially the ones that are your soldiers, your T cells. Even if we have drugs that can go straight to the point to those particular cells, pick them and kill off the virus, there are some cells where we have the latent reservoir of the viruses. So the virus goes quiet in those cells. And then we don't know which particular cells in which the virus is now quiet. So I'm assuming I have killed all the viruses in the body, and the man stops his drugs. Something triggers a stimulus. Those latent cells come up, and suddenly he has manifestation of full-blown AIDS. So it's tricky. It's tricky. What we have are drugs that interact or stop the pathways between the virus entering a particular cell, the virus replicating in that cell, the virus being able to affect the next cell. That's what the kind of drugs we have. A drug that will kill the full cell, will be a dangerous drug because it will kill the full man. Yeah. And then even if you have a drug that does kill the full cells that are infected by the virus, not all are infected, it does kill the cells that are infected by the virus. What of the ones that are the latent reservoirs that we don't know where they are? So it's risky to say, take the drug, stop taking the drugs because we feel we have killed all the cells in your body that have the virus in them. And then one day you do something that triggers the latent cells to wake up and start replicating.
But are we close to finding a cure?
I had mentioned the stem cell. That's one pathway. But in terms of a drug that will actually cure HIV, to my knowledge, no.
How can communities support individuals living with HIV/AIDS?
Okay. We have different community support organizations. We have faith-based organizations. We have different structures, traditional, religious, in our communities that can lend their voices to create awareness, that can lend their voices to be like social support groups. If somebody is being stigmatized because they are HIV positive, they're not being given a job, there should be somebody in that community that can speak up and say, hey, if you don't provide jobs for everybody, irrespective of their status, please close down your organization and leave our community. That's one way the community can actually support. Or there may be government policies that will look so friendly, they can go and champion those policies and then have it. There's one thing to have a policy, there's another thing to enforce the policy. So there could be routes through which you can enforce policies that are already existing. Resource mobilization. They can pull resources together and say, okay, government is providing the HIV drugs. Can we provide multivitamins? Because the man who is on the drugs needs some multivitamins or some support for his immune system as well. Can we provide multivitamins? Can we ensure that this man has basic balanced diet, even if it's one a day, to eat? That's another way the community can support. So there are various ways that community structures can come in.
How about individuals, like those persons watching or listening to this podcast right now? What can they do to contribute to the fight against HIV?
Remember, we are saying we want 90% of persons to get tested. You are watching us, you are listening to us, you are hearing that we are saying there's something like HIV. There's something like testing for HIV. The one step that I think everybody can make is conclude in your mind, resolve with yourself that you will get tested. How often you should get tested will depend on your level of exposure. For health workers, we are exposed to patients. Sometimes you are doing a procedure, you take deliveries, you draw blood, you are at risk. So we do 3 monthly. For those that have minimal exposure, you can do 6 monthly. For the key population, sex workers, gay, transgender, those that do drugs, injectable, they will do 3 monthly as well. So just be aware that there's a place you can go and be tested. Know your status. That's where we start from. Know your status. And then if you are positive, go to the next phase, be on drugs so that we can reduce transmission.
How are we approaching this fight here in the Niger-Delta?
Like I said, there are a lot of partners in our space. In River State, I think even in the Niger-Delta, there are a lot of partners supporting the HIV campaign or HIV program. And there are strong voices. There's a lot of confidentiality. There are these key population groups that we go to and we ensure that we interface with them. We have them tested. We have them on drugs. There are those that we give pre-exposure prophylaxis to. So we are actually contributing in our little quota. We have partners in the space. I don't think the partners will leave the space. If there's any program that has a rich resource of partners, it's HIV program.
How about international organizations? I know you mentioned them earlier on.
Global Strategy,
Yeah.
International AIDS Society, UNFPA, there's so many of them. And what they do beyond resource mobilization is, like I said, the drugs are expensive. So they purchase and send to resource low countries like Nigeria, Sub-Saharan Africa. And then they fund research. We need to get to a cure, like we had earlier mentioned. They fund research. And then they fund policies that speak for or supports reduced stigmatization of our clients. That's where our problem mostly lies. So they advocate for reduced stigmatization of these people that are, in quotes, positive. So, yeah.
Please say a word to everyone who's watching or listening to this right now, the Niger-Delta and even beyond. Say something to them regarding HIV and us dealing with it as a people.
Okay. Come December 1st, we're going to make a lot of noise about World AIDS Day. But beyond World AIDS Day, be aware that you can have yourself tested. Be aware that you can have yourself treated. Be aware that you can reduce the ability of yourself to transmit to the next person. If your goal is to ensure that everybody in your community stays safe, and you know that safety starts with you, you will take responsibility for your health. So generally, I'd like to say that let's start with taking responsibility for our health. What do I need to do to stay safe in the first place? Prevention. What do I need to do to find out if anything has gone wrong? Early diagnosis. What do I need to do when I'm diagnosed? Commence treatment early. What do I need to do to ensure that transmission is zero? I am continuously on my drug treatment. So it's a continuum to keep yourself healthy. So we should try to take responsibility to keep ourselves healthy.
Thank you very much. And that's it for this episode of Canvas, the Niger-Delta Roundtable. What have we done with HIV/AIDS has been the subject matter. 90-90-90. Remember, 90% of us should get tested. 90% of those who test positive should use the medication. And of course, 90% of those who are in that category, of course, must stop the spread as well. My guest has been a public health expert, Dr. Dana Babo. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, too, sir.
And that's it. I'm Adedai Olushaki. Remember, the program is brought to you by SPDC. Do have yourselves a wonderful rest of the day and stay safe. Bye for now.